At 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday, I was reheating leftover curry when my phone buzzed. A family group message. "We've decided it's best if you step away for now." That was it. No call, no explanation, just a thumbs up from Aunt Loretta beneath it. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, then typed, "Understood. I'll step away from the family trust too." I closed the account that night. At 3:11 a.m., my phone buzzed 89 times, missed calls, a voicemail from my dad. "What did you do?" he whispered. But I was just honouring their decision. I've always been the easy one. At least that's what my mother used to say. Rachel never caused any trouble. Such a calm child, so responsible. She'd say it with pride, like it was a compliment, but what she really meant was, I didn't need anything. I didn't ask for help. I didn't cry too loud or get sick too often or demand too much attention. I learned early that silence made me lovable, or at least tolerable. Growing up in our small New Jersey home, I watched my younger sister Melanie burst into every room like a siren. She was dramatic, impulsive, emotional. She scraped knees often, screamed louder, needed more. I was the one fetching Band-Aids. I was the one bringing her ice packs, reading the instructions when she broke a toy, walking her to school when she forgot her backpack, again. When Melanie collapsed from dehydration during a heatwave at 9, I was the one who ran barefoot across the block to find help. My parents praised me, but their words were hollow. "Good job, Rachel," my dad said, like I'd fetched the mail. The paramedics said if I hadn't acted fast, Melanie could have had lasting damage. But I was 13. I should have been scared. I wasn't. I was too used to being the backup adult. By middle school, I was helping Melanie cheat on math homework. In high school, she'd hand me her essays, and I'd rewrite them just enough so the teacher wouldn't suspect. She called me the fixer like it was a joke. I smiled because back then I thought that's what love looked like, doing for others what they wouldn't do for you. College was the first time I lived alone. I remember lying in my dorm bed, heart racing, and realizing no one needed me for anything. It was terrifying. And liberating. I majored in finance, worked 3 jobs, and graduated with honours. By 26, I had my own apartment and was managing multi-million-dollar accounts. At 30, I bought my parents their first new dishwasher in 2 decades. Mum cried. Dad said, "See, we raised a good one." Melanie, meanwhile, drifted from job to job, yoga teacher, dog walker, social media coach. Each career lasted about as long as a carton of milk. She'd come over for dinner, wearing scarves that cost more than my shoes, and laugh about how corporate life would kill me. I nodded, said nothing, picked up the tab. That was our rhythm. She chased her passions. I chased stability. She made messes. I cleaned them up. It wasn't until my 35th birthday that the first crack formed. Melanie showed up late, tipsy, with a new boyfriend in tow. Some guy with sleeve tattoos who called me Miss Spreadsheet. She handed me a card, inside of which was a sticky note that read, "Hey, think you could co-sign on a loan for a new car? I need it to get to my meditation clients. We'll talk later." That was the first time she asked me to put my name on something. "It's just easier with your credit," she said, smiling like it was already decided. "They'll approve it faster. You're like reliable." It wasn't a compliment. It was a strategy, a calculation. I laughed it off, said I'd think about it. But that night, something shifted. I opened a spreadsheet, started a new tab, labelled it Melanie Requests. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either, because deep down I knew this wasn't about a car, it was about ownership. She wanted access to my life's work without understanding what that work cost me. And for the first time, I wondered, what would happen if I stopped saying yes? The family fund started small. At first, it was just a simple transfer here and there. $200 for Mum's insulin when the Medicare gap kicked in, a one-time payment to patch the roof when Dad fell off the ladder and couldn't finish the repairs. Then Melanie called, crying over a credit card she'd maxed out during a spiritual retreat that turned out to be a pyramid scheme. I wired her $1,100 that night, no questions asked. She said, "You're a lifesaver." I believed her. That year, I built a system, an actual spreadsheet, color-coded. I called it the Family Stability Matrix. It tracked their bills, due dates, income gaps, late fees. I set up reminders. I added my own auto payments to their utilities so nothing would slip through the cracks. I created a separate checking account in my name, routed funds through it, and linked their accounts to it. I even negotiated down Mum's hospital bills after her panic attack landed her in the ER. The woman in billing thought I was her attorney. I never told them how much I was doing. I just kept showing up. The dopamine hit of fixing something, of being needed, was intoxicating. Every thank you from Dad, every relieved sigh from Mum, every late-night voicemail from Melanie saying, "I don't know what I'd do without you," made me feel like I was doing something right, like I mattered, like I was more than the invisible, easy daughter. I was the anchor. But anchors sink too. Each year, the requests grew, the roof again, a broken transmission, Melanie's therapy bills, Mum's dental surgery. I paid for it all, telling myself each time, this is the last one. Then Melanie's landlord raised her rent. Then Dad's warehouse job cut his hours. Then the boiler exploded. There was always something new, some new fire I had to smother with my paycheck. Still, I kept going. I told myself I was the strong one, the dependable one, the one who could take it. And on good days, I even believed it. I imagined our family becoming stable again, bills caught up, medications covered, holidays peaceful. I imagined a Christmas where I wouldn't have to fake a smile through clenched teeth, calculating how to stretch my bonus to fix someone else's mess. Then came the photo. Melanie posted it on Instagram, a close-up selfie, radiant and smiling, with the caption, "You don't need saving, you just need to remember who you are." This year taught me how to rise. No handouts, no shortcuts, just me, doing the work. I stared at the screen for a full minute. The photo had been taken 2 weeks after I'd Venmo'd her rent, paid off her therapy invoice, and sent her groceries after she texted, "Emergency, can't eat." There wasn't a single mention, not a hint of the lifeline she'd been grasping for the past 5 years. It wasn't the lack of credit that hurt. It was the rewrite, the erasure. She wasn't just pretending she did it alone. She wanted the world to believe she always had. That night, I opened the spreadsheet. I looked at the running total. 5 years, tens of thousands of dollars, hours of unpaid admin labor, an emotional debt no one acknowledged. And then I stared at the last line I had entered the week before. Final payment? I added a question mark because I knew. It wouldn't be. Not unless I made it so. It came on a Thursday, not with a phone call or a knock on the door. Just a simple buzz. One notification from the family group chat that had, for years, mostly consisted of forwarded memes, recipe links, and the occasional passive-aggressive reminder from Mum about RSVPs. "We've talked, and we think it's best if you step away for a while." That was the message. No preamble, no context, no names. Just a quiet sentence that cleaved like a knife. Beneath it, a thumbs-up emoji from Aunt Loretta. That was all it took to unravel 5 years of silence-swallowed sacrifice. The message came 2 days after I declined Melanie's request to cover a $3,200 yoga retreat in Arizona. "It's for my healing," she'd written. "A chance to reset, to connect with my energy." I'd stared at the text for 10 minutes before replying, "The fund is for emergencies, not getaways." No one else said anything in the chat. Not then. No support, no debate, just quiet. Then silence, then exile. I sat at my kitchen table blinking at the screen. A cup of coffee had gone cold in my hand. Outside, the city moved on without me, horns honking, kids shouting, the usual chaos of early evening. But inside, the world I had anchored for so long suddenly felt distant, like I was watching my own life from behind a sheet of glass. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. There were a dozen things I could have said. A dozen ways to respond. I could have asked what prompted it. I could have demanded an explanation, but instead I typed, "Understood, I'll respect that. And I'll step away from the family fund as well." I didn't wait for replies. I didn't want to give them the chance to walk it back, to muddy the waters with faux concern and spiritual platitudes. I'd been removed, politely, strategically, and now I would remove myself. That night, I logged into the fund account. I turned off the auto payments, Mom's prescriptions, Dad's loan refinance, Melanie's counselling sessions, the shared Netflix family plan no one acknowledged I paid for. I downloaded statements, exported reports, closed the routing flow to their accounts. Then I clicked the final button, close account. It felt surgical, quiet, like severing an umbilical cord that had grown so long and tangled I forgot where I ended and they began. And yet my heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. I expected fury or heartbreak or something explosive, but instead there was stillness, like a calm before a storm I'd already seen coming. At 3:11 a.m. the storm hit. My phone lit up, buzz, pause, again and again. By sunrise there were 89 missed calls, 8 voicemails, 3 texts from Dad, 5 from Melanie, 1 from Mom. The last voicemail played as I stood brushing my teeth. Dad's voice, raspy, angry, scared. "Rachel, what the hell happened? The bank's flagging everything. Your Mom's card was declined. Are you okay? Why would you—" I paused the message, saved it, then opened the chat and typed, "I'm honouring your decision." Send. Nothing more. Then I turned off my phone and went to work, because sometimes peace doesn't feel like closure. It feels like a clean line, drawn in silence, thick with unsaid things and held firm. I had always been the calm one, the fixer, the quiet daughter who absorbed chaos like a sponge. But something shifted that night. When I clicked close account on the family fund, it wasn't just a financial transaction. It was the first real no I had said in years. A quiet rebellion wrapped in keystrokes. The calls kept coming long after dawn broke. I muted them, then set my phone to do not disturb. The buzzing didn't stop. I watched the screen light up, go dark, light up again. 89 missed calls. Dozens of texts, voicemails that stacked like dominoes. I listened to none of them, except one. Dad's voice was raw in the final message, a strange mix of desperation and accusation. "The bank says something's wrong. Fraud alerts. They froze Mom's card. Rachel, what the hell is happening?" I typed a reply, slow and precise. "I'm just doing what you asked. You told me to step away, so I did." I sent it. Then I put my phone face down and stared at the ceiling. I thought I'd feel guilt or rage, but what I felt instead was clarity, like someone had turned off the static in my brain. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next crisis. I wasn't checking balances or rerouting payments or calculating which bill could wait. I just was. By mid-morning, I received an email from the bank. It was flagged high priority. I clicked it, not expecting much, maybe a confirmation of the account closure. Instead, the subject line froze me. Suspicious activity detected. Immediate review required. The body of the message outlined several unusual transaction attempts linked to the now closed family fund. Someone had tried to initiate a transfer. Large amounts, flagged as inconsistent with account history. The routing numbers didn't match the original setup. The bank wanted to confirm whether I had authorised them before proceeding, but the account was closed. I had shut it down. My stomach twisted. The email included attachments, forms, transaction logs, IP access history. I didn't open them right away. My fingers hovered over the mouse. A sick feeling began to coil in my chest. Something was wrong, not just emotionally, logistically, financially. Someone had been preparing for something. I forwarded the email to my personal lawyer without comment, just in case. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Melanie. I didn't demand answers. Not yet, because I didn't need confirmation. I needed evidence, and something inside me, something that had been dormant for years, stirred. The woman who once built a spreadsheet called Family Stability Matrix started a new file that morning, a private one, labelled simply contingency. That day at work, I functioned like usual, presented a quarterly report, approved a vendor switch, laughed when someone brought in donuts, but under the desk I was building a new wall, a clean divide between me and them, just in case this wasn't exile, just in case it was betrayal. And though I didn't say it aloud, didn't text it to anyone, a single sentence repeated in my mind all afternoon. They didn't just cut you out, they planned it. The realization sat heavy, cold and sharp, like ice in my lungs. I couldn't prove anything yet. But I'd been trusted with too many numbers, too many secrets, to mistake coincidence for accident. By nightfall, the calls slowed, the texts stopped, like they knew I wouldn't respond, like they'd said too much, or not enough, and I felt something new. No, not new, forgotten, prepared. The silence lasted 3 days. At first I mistook it for peace. My phone didn't buzz, my inbox was clean. There were no cryptic Facebook posts from Mom, no guilt-ridden emojis from Melanie, just stillness. I thought maybe, just maybe, they were accepting the boundary, maybe they were learning, but on the 4th morning the dam broke. It started with an automated voicemail from the electric company. This is a final notice of disconnection for service at 83 Primrose Lane. I hung up before it finished. I hadn't paid that bill in 2 weeks, because I no longer did. Next came a string of texts from Melanie. They're kicking me out of the therapy program. I told them it's just a delay in payment, but they said no. Do you even care? I didn't reply. Then Mom left a voicemail, voice trembling. Rachel, the landlord came by. He says we're behind. I didn't know. I thought the check went through. That night the group Zoom invite came. Subject, family emergency, urgent. Sender, Emily, our cousin, the neutral one, the peacemaker, the chosen moderator. I almost didn't click it. But something told me this was it, the confrontation, the boiling point, and I was tired of hiding behind calm. When I joined, their faces popped up in neat rectangles. Mum in her dim living room, Dad pacing behind her. Melanie with wet cheeks and a dramatic hoodie. Aunt Loretta perched like royalty in her scarf and pearls, and Emily, caught between them all, eyes darting. No one smiled. Rachel, Mum began, tight-lipped, we didn't expect you to cut us off like that. You didn't have to close everything, Dad added. You could have just said you were upset. I did say it, I replied, calm. You said you needed space. I gave it to you. Melanie wiped her eyes. You just abandoned us. You knew I needed that payment. I can't even see my therapist now. I'm spiraling. And you're just what? Watching? My lips twitched, but I didn't flinch. After everything I've done, I said slowly, you mean after I paid your rent, your rehab, your groceries, and got ghosted over a yoga retreat? That's not fair, she said. Oh, I said, reaching for the folder beside me. Let's talk about fair. I clicked share screen. The spreadsheet filled the screen, rows of numbers, dates, categories, account names. A decade of financial history laid bare in colour-coded clarity. Mum squinted. Dad stepped closer to his monitor. Melanie leaned back. Aunt Loretta rolled her eyes until she saw her name listed under dental emergency, $780. Each payment had notes, scans of receipts, confirmation numbers. The header read, Family Fund, managed by Rachel Monroe, 2017 to 2023. Then I clicked to the final tab, total $86,942.17. Silence. Who even keeps all this? Emily whispered. Someone who knew one day she'd be told she made it up, I said. No one asked you to do all that, Mom snapped. No, I said. You just expected me to. The air in the Zoom turned thick, Shame spread like static, but I stayed steady, the ledger behind me like a wall. This wasn't just a spreadsheet, it was the proof of my erasure. Melanie broke first. "This is sick," she spat through tears. "Who even does this to their own family? You think keeping score makes you better than us? You're just bitter, Rachel." "Always have been. You want a gold star for being the responsible one?" Her voice cracked mid-sentence. She covered her face and let out a sob that echoed in her little Zoom rectangle. The performance wasn't new, but this time something felt different. Desperate, not dramatic. Mom sniffled beside her, voice fragile. "You didn't have to make it final like this. You could have just talked to us. We're family." Rachel inhaled slowly, held the breath, then let it go. "I didn't make it final," she said, voice level. "You did. When you decided to send a group message instead of a conversation. When you reacted to my silence with exile. I didn't cut the cord. I just stopped being the one holding it." Dad said nothing. His face was tight, unreadable. He wasn't pacing now, just staring, arms crossed, as if weighing something he hadn't expected to see. Rachel leaned into her mic. "You keep saying I abandoned you, but what I did was stop bailing you out. There's a difference." Melanie lifted her face, mascara streaked, voice sharp. "So what now? You walk away while we drown?" "No," Rachel said. "I walked away after I kept you afloat for years, and you never noticed until you started sinking." Aunt Loretta made a sound, part scoff, part exhale. "This is about money to you." Rachel turned her gaze directly to the camera. "No," she said, "but it was always about money to you." Then she did something none of them expected. She clicked open a second folder. A PDF appeared. Shareholder Exit Agreement, Vanguard Holdings, LLC. Below that, executed date, March 4th, 2021. The document showed Rachel's name, her signature, the release of equity. "What's that?" Dad asked, frowning. Rachel zoomed in on the numbers. "That," she said, "is the paperwork from when I sold my shares in my old firm." "Why would you—" Mum's voice faded. Rachel didn't blink. "To cover the $38,000 Melanie owed in back medical and legal fees after her DUI. The rehab wasn't fully covered, the lawyer demanded up front, and you were all tapped out, remember?" Melanie's lips parted, stunned. "You sold part of your company?" Dad's voice was a whisper now. Rachel nodded. "I did it quietly. I didn't want applause. I just wanted her to be okay." No one spoke. "You all talk about betrayal," Rachel said, softer now. "But do you know what betrayal really feels like? It's selling a piece of your future, thinking your family will remember, and realizing 2 years later they've rewritten history without you in it." The screen stayed silent. Even Aunt Loretta leaned back, shaken. Rachel looked at Emily, whose eyes were glistening. "I didn't bring all this up to shame you," Rachel said. "I brought it up because I'm done pretending I wasn't there. I'm done erasing myself to protect your comfort." Then, gently, she stopped screen sharing, just a black screen now, with her name, Rachel Monroe. It came in a thick white envelope. No return address, just the bank's logo stamped in navy blue at the corner. Rachel found it in her mailbox late on a Wednesday, sandwiched between a grocery flyer and an alumni newsletter she never read. It was unusually heavy. She didn't open it right away. She made tea, fed the cat, tidied the counter. Something in her gut warned her this wasn't just another statement. When she finally peeled it open, a chill rippled down her spine. The subject line on the cover letter was enough to set every nerve on edge. Fraud investigation summary, loan application under review. She sank into a chair, flipping pages, her fingers trembling. A business loan, $80,000, submitted just 2 weeks prior, under her name, using her social security number. Linked to a business called Monroe Wellness Foundation, a non-profit that, according to the application, specialized in addiction recovery. Rachel had never heard of it. The forms were filled out meticulously. There was a business address, her parents' house, a tax ID number that matched the family fund. Her name was listed as co-founder. And at the bottom of every page, scrawled in blue ink, was a signature that matched hers perfectly, except it wasn't hers. She flipped to the final document, the loan agreement, where the signature sat just above her printed name. Her breath caught in her throat. The loop in the R, the tilt of the M, it was nearly identical. But Rachel had learned to sign her name at 12 years old, trying to copy her mother's grocery lists to be helpful. She knew those pen strokes, the pressure, the hesitation at the end of the E. It wasn't just forged, it was familiar. She placed the page flat on the table and stared. Her tea went cold, the world dulled around her, her eyes locked on the lines of ink. And then it hit her. The signature looked like her mother's, not her mum's current signature. Arthritis had stiffened her hands over the years. But the one Rachel remembered from field trip permission slips and PTA forms in the 90s, smooth, slanted, controlled. She pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth. It couldn't be. It couldn't. But deep down, she knew. She called the bank's fraud department. The woman on the line was calm, practiced, walking her through protocol. It appears the attempt was flagged due to a mismatch in the account status. You had just recently closed the linked account, which triggered an alert. Rachel gave a statement, confirmed she'd had no involvement in the application. The rep paused, then added, "We were able to halt processing before any disbursement occurred, but the intent was clearly structured." Rachel barely heard her. The room felt like it was spinning. Her mother, her own mother. Had she... No, she must be wrong. It had to be someone else. Melanie, maybe. A friend. An opportunist. She wanted to believe that, but the name of the business. The exact signature style. The timing. So soon after Rachel cut off the fund. They hadn't just excluded her. They'd tried to impersonate her. The betrayal pressed in like static, prickling her skin. She had walked away from a family that needed her. Now she realized they hadn't just needed her, they had planned to use her even in her absence. For years, she had justified their dependence as love, sacrifice as loyalty. But now, it felt like conspiracy. Rachel stared at the papers until the words blurred. Her childhood, her memories, her mother's voice, all of it twisted into something jagged. Her whole life, she'd been the good daughter. Now, she wasn't sure she'd ever been a daughter at all. Rachel didn't sleep that night. The folder from the bank sat beside her on the couch, untouched since sunset, but her laptop screen glowed well past midnight, tab after tab, document after document. She'd opened every old bank notification, every financial alert, every archive she could access. If they had forged one thing, they might have done more. At 2:07 a.m. she found it. A loan in 2017, small by comparison, just under $12,000, approved under her name, co-signed by her father. The reason listed, home repairs, structural integrity. Rachel's stomach dropped. She hadn't applied for any loan that year. She was buried in client work, working 80-hour weeks to prove herself for a promotion. The only conversation she remembered vaguely was her dad complaining about a plumbing leak. She opened the attached documents, same pattern, her name, her social security number, her old address. And there, her father's signature right next to a forged one that looked like hers. The betrayal burned fresh. He hadn't asked. He hadn't even hinted. He had just done it. Quietly, confidently, like she was a resource to be used, not a person to be trusted. By sunrise, Rachel had already made 3 calls, one to the bank fraud department, another to the IRS fraud hotline, and a third to her attorney. The last call was the hardest. "This is going to get messy," the lawyer warned. "You sure you want to escalate?" "I'm sure," Rachel said, her voice like steel. "They didn't stop when I said no. They only stopped when they got caught." And then came the memory, quiet, innocent at the time, but now it landed like a stone in her stomach. 3 months ago, Melanie had texted her out of the blue. Hey, I'm filling out a health insurance form. Do you remember the exact spelling of your middle name? And what's your date of birth again? Just for the dependents section, I think they're asking weird questions. At the time, it hadn't raised alarms. Families did this all the time, filled out forms, swapped info. Rachel had replied without hesitation. She even included her social security number when Melanie followed up saying, "Ugh, now they need that too, so annoying." Now she saw it clearly. They'd planned this, months in advance. The business application, the forged loan, the timing of the group chat exile. They didn't just want her to step back, they wanted her silent. Still tied to the fund legally, still usable, but voiceless, a ghost donor. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, composing the police report. The facts flowed easier than she expected. She was tired of protecting them. She listed the fraud, the forged applications, the unauthorized loans. She attached copies of her identity theft affidavit for the IRS. She uploaded the document trail. Then, in the final box, additional notes. She wrote, "I am the sole financial contributor to what was positioned as a family fund. My identity has been used without consent. This isn't neglect. This is intentional, and I'm done being complicit." She clicked submit. There was no grand moment of triumph, no music swelling in the background, just the quiet hum of her laptop and the steady beating of her heart. But in that moment, Rachel didn't feel like a victim. She felt like someone taking her life back. For years she had let guilt masquerade as duty, let love blur into obligation, let silence cover up theft. But now she would speak, with records, with reports, with law, not for revenge, but for freedom. It started to line up like pieces of a cruel puzzle. Rachel sat at her dining table, a spread of emails, texts, and statements laid out before her like evidence in a courtroom. But it wasn't just the forgeries or the hidden loans that chilled her. It was the quiet choreography of the past year. They'd staged it. The group chat message hadn't been a last-minute decision. It wasn't the product of heated emotions or a spontaneous backlash. It was a velvet-wrapped knife, a soft exile that conveniently removed her oversight while keeping her legal ties intact. It was brilliant in the most devastating way. "Rachel, maybe it's time you took a little break," Mum had said last fall. "You're always so stressed. We can take it from here. You've done enough." At the time, it sounded like concern, kindness. Now she saw it clearly. It was phase 1. The more she rewound, the more threads unravelled. That yoga retreat request from Melanie hadn't just been tone deaf. It had been a test, a push to gauge Rachel's willingness or resistance. And when she said no, the exile arrived like a formal memo. "We think it's best you step away. Not we're worried, not let's talk. Just a decision already made." And beneath it, a thumbs-up emoji from Aunt Loretta, like sealing a transaction. They weren't just cutting her out emotionally, they were executing a plan. Her mind darted back to something her mother had said 2 years ago, during a random Sunday call when they were setting up the family fund. "You should be the one listed on the paperwork, sweetie," Mum had said. "I hate dealing with banks. You're so good at this. We trust you." Rachel had felt proud then, honoured, finally recognised for the backbone she had become. Now that memory tasted like poison. Of course she was the one listed. Of course she was the primary signatory. It gave them an easy way to keep the fund running without taking responsibility. And more importantly, it gave them time to learn the system, time to use her structure, time to eventually push her out while keeping the machinery running without her. Rachel stood up, pacing now. The signs had been there. She just hadn't wanted to see them. How Melanie kept asking casual questions, how to reset passwords, how Rachel routed payments, what the backup protocol was if she were unavailable. "I just want to understand," Melanie had said once, laughing, "in case you get hit by a bus or something." Rachel had smiled. She even typed up a guide. It hadn't been a joke. It had been research. She looked at the timeline she'd drawn on a notepad. Red ink marked the warning signs. Green marked her own blind spots. The group message hadn't been rejection, it had been erasure. Not just from their lives, but from control, from protection, from power. They wanted her out of the loop but still inside the system. They wanted her money, her name, her structure, but none of her voice. The trust she had thought was mutual had been weaponized. The fund she built out of love had been turned into a trap. It hit her all at once. She hadn't just been left behind. She'd been manoeuvred out, a quiet, strategic removal, by people she had protected, fed, rescued. And the worst part, it had worked until she shut the account. Until she turned around and saw the edge of the cliff they'd been guiding her toward, not to walk beside her, but to push her off. The call came just after midnight. Rachel had just turned off the kitchen lights when her phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number flashed on the screen, but somehow she knew it was Melanie. She let it ring twice, 3 times, then picked up. "Hey," Melanie's voice cracked on the other end. I just wanted to say I get it now. Okay? I know I was wrong." Rachel didn't respond. She leaned against the fridge, the hum of its motor the only sound in the kitchen. "I've been thinking," Melanie continued, her voice watery, "about everything. The fund, the pressure. You always did more than we saw. I never said thank you, and I'm sorry." It wasn't what Rachel expected. It wasn't what she wanted either. "Mel," she said slowly, "can I ask you something?" A pause. "Yeah?" "That loan application, the Monroe Wellness Foundation. Did you know about it?" Silence. 1 second. 2. Then the longest stretch of quiet Rachel had ever endured. Not the awkward kind, not the kind that begs to be filled, but the kind that confirms everything. Finally, Melanie whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go that far." And the line went dead. Rachel stared at the phone in her hand, screen still glowing. She didn't call back. She didn't scream or sob or throw anything. She just stood there, in her silent apartment, and felt the final thread snap, not like a violent rupture, but like something that had already frayed beyond repair, finally giving way. This wasn't heartbreak. This was release. Rachel moved to the couch and sat down, the city lights blinking through her window. Her phone was still in her hand, but now it felt light, almost weightless. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. In some quiet corner of her mind, she had known this moment would come, that when confronted, Melanie wouldn't deny it. She wouldn't confess either. She'd just disappear, like she always had. Rachel had spent years cleaning up after her family, tucking away their messes, fixing their missteps, absorbing their chaos. And now, when the truth surfaced, they evaporated like fog under sunlight. The real clarity wasn't Melanie's silence, it was Rachel's stillness. For the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel like she had to react. She didn't feel like she owed anyone a response, a follow-up, a compromise. She felt done. That realization wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. The pain didn't vanish, but it no longer ruled her. The betrayal didn't sting less, but it didn't shake her core. She wasn't crying, she was wide awake and aware. This was the final cut, not a slash, but a surgical removal, precise, clean, long overdue. Rachel placed the phone on the table, stood up and walked to the window. The street below was quiet, save for the occasional passing car. A couple laughed from a balcony 2 floors up. Life was still happening. And for once, hers wasn't on pause. She didn't know what the next days would bring, the paperwork, the legal procedures, the fallouts. But she did know one thing. She would face it without apology, without guilt, without being dragged back into the roles they'd written for her. She was no longer their safety net. She was no longer their excuse. She was just Rachel. Free. Rachel hadn't spoken to Uncle Frank in over a decade. He was the family ghost, the name muttered in cautionary tones. "That's what happens when you abandon your people," Mum would say, slicing potatoes for Sunday dinner. Poor Frank just couldn't handle responsibility. So when his name popped up on her caller ID, an old number from a state she didn't even know he lived in anymore, Rachel nearly didn't answer, but curiosity won. She picked up. "Hello?" "Rachel." His voice was gravelly but warm. "You look well." She blinked. "You saw me?" There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "LinkedIn. One of my old colleagues follows your firm. I've been keeping tabs, quietly. Didn't want to intrude." Rachel sat down, unsure what to say. Frank had vanished when she was in college. One day he was at Thanksgiving, the next never mentioned again, like a chapter ripped from the book. "I heard about what happened," he continued. "The fund, the loan, Melanie." Rachel froze. "How?" "Families talk," he said, with a bitterness that sounded earned. "Even the ones who swear they're keeping secrets." He took a breath. "Listen, I didn't call to rehash your pain. I called to tell you you're not crazy." Rachel exhaled slowly, her grip on the phone loosening. "You're not the first," Frank went on. "I was where you are once. Your dad, he did something similar with me. Co-signed a business deal using my credit. Claimed it was temporary. I didn't even know until a collector showed up at my door." Rachel's stomach twisted. He said you abandoned the family." Another dry laugh. "I didn't abandon them. I escaped." Frank explained it all. How their father, Rachel's grandfather, had pulled the same trick in the 70s, borrowed money under his brother's name, then vanished. How the narrative had always been flipped. The one who said no became the villain, the one who refused to carry everyone else's weight. Cast out. It wasn't dysfunction, it was tradition. Rachel sat motionless, heart pounding. All these years she thought she'd failed some unspoken rule of family. That maybe if she'd given more, tried harder, explained herself better, they'd love her the way she needed. But now she saw it wasn't about her at all. She was just the latest stop on a cycle. "You're not the black sheep," Frank said gently. "You're the first one to break the spell." Rachel's eyes stung, but no tears came. "You think they'll ever see it?" she whispered. "No," Frank replied. "Not in the way you hope." "But that's not your burden anymore." He paused. "I've been living small but peaceful. No more begging for love I had to buy. No more rescuing people who never wanted saving." His voice softened. "You did more than I ever could. You carried them for years. And you didn't just walk away. You left a trail of truth. That takes guts." Rachel closed her eyes. She imagined her name not as a placeholder on a bank account, but as a boundary line. A signal that said, "This ends with me." She wasn't alone, and she wasn't a traitor. She was a survivor, a pattern breaker, a woman who had finally stepped out of a generational shadow and into her own light. The apartment smelled like new paint and possibility. Rachel sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, a box of cookware unopened beside her. No couch yet, no curtains, just the soft echo of her own breath bouncing off the walls. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't absence, but freedom. After everything, shutting the fund, the family confrontation, the forged loans, Rachel had done what she once thought unthinkable. She moved away. A different city, different firm, different life. She'd changed her number. She updated her email. She cleared her calendar of obligations that only existed to keep other people comfortable. No one knew her new address. No one, except her attorney, had access to anything connected to her name. And for the first time in years, Rachel didn't wake up with dread. No buzzing phone, no guilt-laced messages, no passive-aggressive jabs dressed as jokes about her being the stable one. She was gone from their world. And slowly, she was returning to her own. The new job came with less prestige but more kindness. The team brought her coffee, not problems. The boss said, "Thank you, not just "you're dependable." She walked to work, cooked her own meals, laughed out loud when she watched old comedy clips online. It felt unfamiliar, which made her realize just how long she'd been surviving, not living. Then one afternoon, while sorting through a folder of digital change of address tasks, she saw it. A Facebook message request. She almost deleted it. Then she saw the name. Tyler. Melanie's ex. The one everyone pretended never existed after he left. The one Rachel had helped once, quietly Venmoing him gas money so he and Melanie could get away from a fight that spiraled. She tapped the message. Didn't expect to ever say this, but thank you. For helping Melanie when no one else did, and for trying to help me too. I wasn't ready to listen back then, but I saw what you did. You were the only one who didn't ask for anything. Just wanted to say, I see it now. Rachel read it 3 times, then again. Her hands didn't shake, her eyes didn't blur, but something shifted deep in her chest. A quiet release. It wasn't that Tyler's words healed everything. It was that someone had seen her, really seen her. Not as the fixer, not as the wallet, not as the fallback, as a person. Rachel typed nothing in return. She didn't need to. The message wasn't a request, it was a recognition. And in that moment, something settled inside her. A truth she'd never been given permission to believe before. She had done her best. She had loved hard. She had given more than anyone had asked. And even if the people closest to her never saw it, someone had. Someone finally had. She stood up, stretched her arms, and looked around the empty apartment. It wasn't furnished yet. There were still echoing corners and unpacked boxes, but it was hers. Not because she paid the rent, but because no one else had a key. Her life, at last, was no longer shared real estate. The snow had just started falling outside her window when Rachel opened her laptop and saw it. Subject line, Merry Christmas. Thinking of you. The sender, Mum. She stared at the email for a full minute, her breath steady, her fingers motionless over the keyboard. The living room around her was warm. A soft jazz playlist drifted from the speakers, and the pine-scented candle she'd lit an hour earlier filled the space with something close to nostalgia, but not quite. Rachel clicked. A photo loaded first, her parents in the living room, standing beside their old tree. They were smiling, but the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. The room looked emptier than she remembered, the ornaments sparse. Beneath the photo, a short line. It's not the same without you. Hope you're well. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a performance for the inbox. Rachel didn't respond. She moved the message to a separate folder labelled Keep for Court, then closed the tab. 10 minutes later, a second notification pinged. From melaniegrace.rebuild@gmail.com. She opened it out of reflex. Curiosity, not hope. The subject line read, New beginnings plus a tiny favour 3. The message was longer. Hey sis, I've been thinking so much about growth and healing lately. I'm starting over. Clean slate. I found a great place across town, close to work, safe neighbourhood. I just need help with first and last month's rent to lock it in. I promise this is the last time. I know we've had our stuff, but I'm different now. Please consider it. It would mean everything. Rachel sat back in her chair. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. It had been nearly a year since she closed the family fund, changed her number, moved cities. A year since she stopped being the invisible glue. And yet, here they were, still reaching out with open palms, still pretending the past was a hiccup, not a pattern, still asking, never acknowledging. But something had changed. This time, Rachel didn't feel the pull, didn't feel the urge to explain herself, to soften the silence with reason or guilt. She didn't reply. She didn't even mark it as unread. She simply stood, walked into the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. The window over the sink framed the snow as it began to dust the city in quiet white. She leaned against the counter, glass in hand, and listened. To nothing. No buzzing phone, no nagging voice in her head whispering, maybe you should help, just this once. No old ache rising up to remind her that silence used to feel like punishment. Now it felt like power. This was what peace really looked like. Not a dramatic moment of closure, not a grand speech, but a soft refusal, a quiet no whispered not in anger, but in self-respect. Rachel didn't need to slam a door. She had already walked through it. And this unreturned message, this unopened wound, was proof she was healing. The goodbye she'd given her family wasn't just an exit. It was a rescue, not of them, of herself. A week later, Rachel found herself in a neighbourhood cafe she'd never thought she'd return to. The rain rattled against the awning, and the scent of ground coffee beans steamed from the cups she carried. She wanted anonymity, a corner table, cereal in her tote, journal open. But as she rounded the counter, she saw a familiar figure. Aunt Carol was seated at a window table, pearl earrings glinting even in the overcast light, sipping a latte with a faint smile. She looked up, and Rachel's heart jolted, but only for a moment. Carol waved, polite, reserved. Rachel sighed inwardly and sat not across, but at an adjacent table. She didn't need confrontation, not here. Carol cleared her throat as she ordered a second coffee. When the barista stepped away, she walked over. "Rachel," she said lightly, glancing at the seat opposite, "mind if I join?" Rachel nodded once. Carol sat. There was no apology, no recognition of the past. The air was polite but charged, like two old colleagues negotiating the terms of departure. "I've been thinking," Carol began, voice measured, "about everything, the fund, the mess. Look, if you'd consider it, maybe we could start a new emergency fund, a smaller one, just for essentials. I know I was harsh before. I'm sorry if I hurt you." Rachel looked at her, expression neutral. She let the words hang, tasted them for sincerity. "I'm not interested," she said simply. Carol tilted her head. "But Rachel, you've been the glue in our lives for years. Even if you withdrew, so many of us still—" Rachel cut in softly but firmly. "I already set up a fund." Carol blinked. "You did?" Rachel nodded once, took a slow sip of her coffee. "It's called My Future." Carol's face shifted. Recognition, maybe regret, flickered in her eyes, but Rachel didn't elaborate. "For emergencies?" Carol ventured. "For real emergencies. Mine," Rachel said. "Not yours." They sat in that silence for a moment. Then Carol looked away, collected her things with understated dignity, and left. Rachel didn't reach for her journal or her phone. She just watched raindrops roll down the window, each one a tiny mirror polishing the still world outside. Because here's what most people don't get. The hardest shutdown isn't a shout. It's a door echoing closed, quietly, finally, forever. Months passed. Snow melted into spring. The new city became home. Her apartment filled in. Bookshelves, kitchen mats, photos of friends, not family. Work became meaningful again, not only because of the paycheck, but because people noticed her voice, her expertise, her boundaries. They appreciated her energy, not just her competence. At night, she jogged along tree-lined streets and didn't feel like she was outrunning guilt. One afternoon, she received an email forwarded from a support group forum she'd joined anonymously. Under the pseudonym Phoenix Spreadsheets, she'd left advice for someone stuck in a family-funded trap. Detail by detail, she had helped set up boundaries. The gist of gratitude was familiar, but the person mentioning her was different. A widow, a single dad, a strong kid, all trying to untangle from family abuse tied to money. Rachel paused. A knot loosened, then she clicked. Within days, she'd received 3 messages, a cousin twice removed, a co-worker, and someone she didn't know, but who had stumbled into her post after Googling "used by family fund story." The stranger wrote, "Your story made me brave enough to step away. Thank you. I paid off the medical debt they piled on me for years, and I finally feel safe." Rachel exhaled. It wasn't revenge, it was resonance. Out of her pain grew purpose. She wasn't building a charity. There was no non-profit name or tax ID. She didn't want leverage. She offered free templates, advice, emotional support, a listening email. She helped people draft letters, set bank alerts, open new accounts, cut ties, digitally, legally, financially. It wasn't therapy, it was transformation. As spring turned to summer, she began hosting closed Zoom calls, anonymous support meetings for people healing from financial family trauma. She called it Ledger Break, a nod to the spreadsheets she once used and burned. It surprised her how many joined. People from coast to coast, people who had been the quiet giver, the accidental financier, the unseen funder, people who needed someone to say, "You're not crazy, you're not required." Call after call, stories poured in, stories that echoed her own. And every time she heard a voice say, "I finally stood up," something inside her surged. She never told her old family what she was doing. She didn't need to, because this wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about helping others untangle themselves from the same trap. One bleak afternoon, she updated the ledger break page and added a line in the support document, "You are not the villain for saying no." Then, rhetorically, she added beside it, "I didn't abandon them, I was protecting myself." And beneath that, she typed in bold, "I am not the daughter who broke us, I am the first who broke free." Today, she looks back and sees the pattern. She sees the old photos of Melanie's cheering posts, silent about the contributor behind them. She sees the forged forms. She sees the polite exile. But more importantly, she sees herself. And she's not bitter, just healed. "I didn't abandon my family. I was the first to escape.